We all ask this question at some point. Who am I, really? Maybe it hits you after a breakup when suddenly the person you built yourself around is gone. Maybe it's during a career shift when the job title you wore like armor doesn't fit you anymore. Or maybe it's just one of those quiet Tuesday nights when you're scrolling through old photos and realize you can't quite connect with the person staring back at you. Psychology and philosophy have been wrestling with this question for decades. Are you your past? All those moments that brought you here? Are you your feelings? That swirl of emotions that changes by the hour? Are you your mistakes? Those things you did that you can't take back? Or are you something that you keep becoming? Something that's never quite finished. I'm Nikodem, your local philosopher, and today let's talk about who you are. Or maybe more accurately, let's talk about why not knowing who you are might be the most human thing of all. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Psychologists have known for a long time that feeling confused about your identity isn't a bug. It's a feature. Back in the 1950s and 60s, a psychologist named Erik Erikson was watching teenagers and noticed something fascinating. Erikson himself had an interesting history. He was born in Germany to a Danish mother, never knew his biological father, and was raised by his Jewish stepfather. It's important because he felt like an outsider everywhere. Too Danish for the Germans, and too German for the Danes. Too Jewish for some, not Jewish enough for others. This personal struggle with belonging shaped his entire understanding of identity. Erikson realized that teenagers weren't just being dramatic when they kept reinventing themselves every 6 months. That friend who was goth in September and preppy by March, they weren't confused. They were doing exactly what they are supposed to do. Erikson called this an identity crisis. But here's the thing. He didn't mean crisis like a disaster. He meant it like a turning point, a necessary crossroads. You have to not know who you are before you can figure it out. Think about it. How else would you discover yourself? You try on different versions like clothes. Some of them fit and some don't. That's not immaturity. That's the work of becoming. Building on Erikson's work, James Marcia took this idea further in the 1960s. He noticed that people handle this identity question in 4 different ways. Some people just drift. They never really commit to anything, never really search. Others grab onto the first identity handed to them, usually by their parents or community, and never question it. Then there are those stuck in endless searching, always trying new things, but never settling. And finally, there are those who search, explore, and eventually commit to something that feels authentic to them. And here's what's beautiful about Marcia's work. He showed us that being in that searching phase, that moratorium where you don't know who you are, isn't falling behind. It's part of the journey. You can't skip it and arrive at authentic identity. You have to go through not knowing. And here's where it gets interesting. A psychologist named Dan McAdams came along and said, wait, what if identity isn't something you have, but something you do? McAdams studied how people talk about themselves and realized we're all walking around with stories in our heads. We take all these random events. That time you stood up to a bully, that summer you failed at camp, that conversation that changed everything. And we stitch them together into a story that explains who we are. Think about the last time you met someone new and they asked about yourself. You didn't list facts like a Wikipedia page. You told a story. Well, I grew up here, then this happened, which led me to realize you're not just reporting your identity, you're creating it through the telling. Now, the psychologists gave us frameworks. But the existentialist philosophers, well, they blew the whole thing wide open, but not necessarily in the chronological order. Jean-Paul Sartre, writing in Paris cafés in the 1940s, while the city was occupied by Nazis, came up with this idea that shook the foundations of how we think about ourselves. He said, existence precedes essence. It sounds vague and weird, but hear me out. You weren't born with a manual for who you are. There's no cosmic blueprint with your name on it. You write that manual every single time you make a choice. Sartre had lived through the occupation, watched people become collaborators or resistance fighters. So how circumstances could transform ordinary people into heroes or villains. And this perhaps shaped his conviction that we are radically free and therefore radically responsible for who we become. This is terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because there's no one to blame if you don't like who you have become. Liberating because it means you are not stuck with who you were yesterday. The existentialist saw identity as something that's constantly moving and constantly being recreated. You know that feeling when you look back at yourself from 5 years ago and think, who was that person? Or I was so stupid back then. And that's not memory failing, that's evidence that you have changed. You have made thousands of choices since then, and each one has slightly rewritten who you are. Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre's partner and brilliant philosopher as well, in her own right took this even further. She pointed out that we don't just create ourselves in isolation. We become who we are through our relationships, our situations, our struggles against the limitations placed on us. She famously wrote about how women aren't born but became women through social forces, showing how identity is both something we create and something that's shaped by the world around us. This is why you can feel like a completely different person in different contexts. With your parents, you might fall back into being their child. With your oldest friends, you are the version of yourself from years ago. At work, you are a professional you. These aren't masks. They are all real versions of you, constantly being negotiated and recreated. The existentialist would say that's exactly right. There's no real you hidden underneath all these versions. You are the process of becoming, not some fixed thing waiting to be discovered. So if identity is this fluid, constantly changing thing, what actually makes you you? Let's break down some usual suspects. Do your past events define you? That heartbreak, that triumph, that trauma, that perfect summer you had. Do these make you who you are? Well, yes and no. First of all, they shape you. Absolutely. They are the raw material. But think about two people who experience the same event. Say, losing a parent young. One person might become fiercely independent. Another might become deeply anxious about the loss. The event matters, but what matters more is what you do with it, how you weave it into your story. What about your mistakes? That thing you did that you are still ashamed of, or that decision you would give anything to take back. Does that define you? Our culture often acts like it does, especially in the age of screenshots and permanent records. But both psychology and philosophy push back on this. Your mistakes are part of your story, but they don't exhaust your identity. You are not the worst thing you have ever done. Just like you are not the best thing you have ever done. You are the ongoing process of responding to both. So what about emotions and feelings? That anxiety that seems to color everything. That joy that bubbles up at weird moments. That sadness that visits uninvited. Is that who you are? These feelings are certainly part of you, but they are more like weather than landscape. They pass through you, they affect you, but they are not the core of your identity. If they were, you would be a different person every time your mood shifted. Many contemporary psychologists argue that identity is both relational and process-based. It's the accumulation of your choices, your commitments, the stories you tell, and the relationships you maintain. All of it moving through time. And all of it constantly being updated. Think of it like a river. A river has a name, a location, banks that contain it. But the water itself, that's always moving, always changing. You can never step in the same river twice, as the philosopher Heraclitus said way back in the ancient Greece. The river is still the river, even though it's never made of the same water. You and me are like that river. You have continuity, memories, patterns, relationships that persist. But you are also constantly flowing, constantly becoming something slightly different than you were a moment ago. The existentialist would add one crucial element. You're not just passively flowing. Every choice you make is like adjusting the riverbanks, changing where the water can go. You're both the river and the engineer. And here's why all of this matters right now. Today, in your actual life. We live in an age that's obsessed with identity, but terrified of uncertainty. Social media ask us to brand ourselves, to pick an aesthetic, and to know our niche. The algorithm rewards consistency, but humans aren't consistent. We are contradictory, complex, and constantly evolving. No wonder so many of us feel lost. We are trying to be fixed points in a fluid universe. We are trying to arrive at ourselves like it's a destination, when really it's more like dancing. You are never done dancing. You are just always in the process of it. And there's also something existentialists knew that feels especially relevant now. The moments when you don't know who you are, those aren't failures. They're openings. They're the spaces where something new can emerge. Every identity crisis is also an identity opportunity. So let's recap what we have discovered. Psychology shows us that identity develops through stages, through crisis and commitment, through the stories we tell about ourselves. It's not found, but constructed piece by piece, story by story. Existentialism shows us that identity is fluid, created through our choices, never finished as long as we are alive. And what's important, both perspectives agree. Not knowing who you are isn't a problem to be solved, it's a part of being human. So maybe the real insight is that discomfort you feel when someone asks, "Who are you?" and you don't have a clean answer, that's not confusion, that's accuracy. You're recognizing something true, that you are too complex, too dynamic, and too alive to be captured in a simple answer. The question isn't really, who am I? As if there is some fixed answer waiting to be discovered. The question is, who am I becoming? And that's something only you can answer, choice by choice, day by day. And if this exploration of identity got you thinking, you might be interested in my last video where we tackle something even more provocative. The argument against empathy. Because sometimes the things we think make us good people actually be holding us back from genuine connection. And for now, thanks for watching this video. If you have enjoyed, don't forget to give me a like and to subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos like this somewhere in the future. The comment section is for you, so don't be shy. And as always, thank you for watching once again. Goodbye.